Hi everyone, this is Ricky with Bromero Cards, and I'm back this week with another card that I'm making. It's actually a shaker card, so I hope you enjoy watching this. And this is a picture of what the card looks like. I'm using the Hero Arts Koi set, and that'll be coming up here in a second. I'll show that to you. And then we're going to get started with it. It's a pretty cool step, or pretty cool stamp set. I think you could do a lot of things with it. So let's get started. With some Canson watercolor paper. I measured this at 6 by 4.25. And then today we're going to play around with some distressed oxide inks from Tim Holtz. We're going to use cracked pistachio first. And what we're going to do is just rub this onto the paper. It doesn't really matter what order you put this in or how dark or light the ink is. You're just going to place it on the cards. And then the next one that I'm going to be using is Broken China. And I'm going to press that onto the craft mat and spread that around onto the same paper. You can mix the colors, it's fine. Later on, you're going to see what kind of texture this brings to the paper. These distressed inks are really nice. The oxide inks, the distressed regular inks are really nice too. This one is Faded Jeans. I'm going to do the same thing, spread it onto the paper. These colors mix really well, and if you used regular distressed inks before, they're great, but these have a different texture. They're a little creamier, and then when you add water to them, it kind of oxidizes the paper. And so what's going to happen here is I'm going to spray this with some water, normally like you do with the distressed inks, but with the oxide inks, this actually makes it a little more chalkier, and it also soaks into the water quicker. So I'm gonna dry this out, and then we're gonna start adding some more layers to this. Actually, this is going 8 times as fast as I was going. This actual video actually took me an hour and 40 minutes to make. That's a close-up of what it looks like. So now we're going to go back to the cracked pistachio and smash that down on the craft mat and spray it with some water. And we're going to dip the paper into the color and use the drying tool to dry that out. And then you just dip it in there and use the rest of the color. Try not to waste too much. Spray it with some more water, give it a little bit more texture. The card looks great the way it is now, but I wanted to add it some more. So now I'm using Broken China, the exact same thing, dipping it, drying it, spraying it with water, dipping it again. Just adding a lot more texture to the paper. Again, this looks beautiful actually already, but I wanted to add a little more. I go back to Faded Jeans, the same process, dip it, dry it, spray more water. I think I dip it a few more times. Yeah, there we go. And we're going to dry it even more. And what I'm trying to build is a water scene for my card, and these blues are actually doing that for me. I think I go through this a couple more times. I sped this up for you so that you don't have to watch it at regular speed. And then once I finish, I clean off the craft mat, and then I start with fossilized amber. So I'm going to take the fossilized amber and just smash it down and do just like I did all the blues. And this will give a little bit of green into the pattern, which is pretty nice. It makes it look a little bit more like there's water, maybe some sunshine or something hitting it. And then I go back a lot of times and go through it, and this is the finished example. I'm blotting it off. And then I'm going to take some shimmer spray here, and then just spray that along the top, maybe about a foot, 2 feet up high. And then I'm going to dry that out again, and it takes a little bit. Actually, this piece of paper took me almost 30 minutes to do, just the paper. You can see the shimmer a little bit here in the video, but it doesn't really give it justice. So now it's time to start stamping out the koi fish, and I have my MISTI tool here. For not for sure what that is, it's just a tool where you can place a stamp onto the paper, stamp, ink up your stamp again, and stamp it again in the exact same spot. It's a great tool to have, especially when you're either not used to stamping or you just get a bad impression sometimes. So I'm taking the first koi fish, and I'm going to be using Manatee on this koi fish. This is the lightest level. I'm going to ink up my stamp pretty quickly here. Everything is fast forwarded here. I didn't get a good impression. You'll see an example of this. If you can see, the whole fish isn't there. So this is why the MISTI is a good tool, because then if you just had your blocks, you'd have to kind of guess exactly where you're stamping next. So I'm cleaning off my stamp, and then I'm just going to do the same thing for the other koi fish, and I'm using the same color. And then I'm going to come back in with a darker color, a hippo. It's a darker gray. And then I'm going to line up my second level here. These are pretty easy to do. There are some very difficult stamps to use for layering, but these are actually pretty easy. So I'm just going to stamp down the darker level here, and I'm going to do it on both of the koi fish. I'm using a Lawn Fawn stamp shimmy, if you're wondering what I'm wiping that off with. It's dirty. I've used it a lot. That's a really great tool to wipe off your stamps. It takes a lot of the ink off. And now I'm actually working on the third layer, and I'm going to actually emboss this. So I'm going to use my powder tool here to take off the static electricity, use some Versamark ink, and put the top layer on both of the koi fish. And I'll wipe it off again and put it onto the next fish. You always want to wipe off the stamp before you do your next image so that nothing gets stuck or transferred over to the new fish, or actually to the new stamp, whatever you're stamping. So I'm lining that up, and I'm going to ink this up again. I'm going to stamp it, and then I'm just going to put everything away, and I'm actually going to be using some rose gold embossing powder from the Ton Stamps. It's a really pretty pink gold. It's really nice to see. And then on the other koi fish, as I put this away, the other koi fish, I'm actually going to use some silver embossing powder I got from Simon Says Stamp. Not for sure what brand it is. It may be their own brand. I don't have it labeled, so I'm not for sure. So now I'm going to take my heat gun, and I'm going to melt the embossing powder. And it makes it pretty shiny. I show it to you here. This is really sped up, so yeah, it makes the fish shiny. And now I'm going to start working on the lily pads, I believe. Oh, actually, no, the eyes. I'm going to use Lawn Fawn Soot for the eyes. It's a dark brown, almost a black. And I tested it out on the sheet first just to see how it stamps out. I didn't use the MISTI for this because it's such a small stamp, but you'll see my head go in the way there a few times trying to even that out to make sure I'm putting it in the right place. And then once I'm finished with this, I'll bring it up and show it to you. The scrap piece of paper you're using actually was from the first card I made, because what I do is I make the card and then I keep everything out that I need. So get everything out in reach is nice. So now I am doing the lily pads, and I'm using freshly cut grass Lawn Fawn colors. And now I'm going to do the veins, which I believe is Noble Fur. Yes. And I didn't use the MISTI for these because they're such small stamps, and they're pretty easy to actually layer. There's no difficult parts to it. And then what I'm going to start doing is the little flowers that go with it. I'm going to use sunflower for the actual bottom portion of the flower. There we go, sunflower from Lawn Fawn. Lawn Fawn inks are really good. I have all the colors because they're just really good inks. And then I'm going to use fake tan to do the outlines of the flowers. These I get a little off it's a little weird. I maybe should have used the MISTI for this, but I didn't because I didn't want to take the time to do it. They're not too bad. They could have been better, but hey, we learn from mistakes, right? And then in the middle, I'm just going to use Minty Fresh to stamp the middle of the flower, just to give it a little bit of light green color in the center. I probably could have gone with a darker orange, and now that I look at the card, I probably should have. But it's okay. So I need to stamp these out. I don't have the die cut, so I'm going to use my scan and cut. And if you don't have the machine, it's amazing. It cuts out everything for you. You don't have to buy the dies. To me, it saved money. And then I'm going to show you each piece here, what they look like. And then my next door neighbor, they brought us some eggs, so for Easter. So that Tony brought that in to me. And then here's the paper. It's shiny. Then I'm going to use some Lawn Fawn Stitch dyed rectangles here, and I'm going to make a frame for the shaker card. I do have some shaker dies or frame dies that I could have used for this, but this just seemed easier and I had it out on my desk already. I'm going to use some low-tack tape, and I'm going to tape this down so it doesn't move in the die cutting machine. Here in a second you'll see that I actually remove all the tape and then readjust it because it was uneven. I tend to do uneven die cuts for some reason. It really aggravates me, and a lot of paper gets wasted because of that. I wish there was an easier way, really. And if there is, somebody let me know, because I would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to stick this through the die cutting machine, and then everything will be cut out. I'm going to separate it in here in a second. I'm going to take off all the tape. Now, this took me here, it only takes me like 5 seconds to remove, but if you see how slow I was removing the paper, I was so afraid that it was going to tear the paper because it was kind of a little too sticky. So there we have the two separate pieces. I'm going to use the middle piece as the foundation for the shaker card, and then the frame is going to be used to hold up everything. I'm going to take some heat resistant acetate, and I'm going to cut a square. And this is where I make my first mistake, actually. Not exactly right here, but before I attach that to the frame, I should have done the Heat Emboss sentiment on this. I did this on the first card that I made, and I did it again on the second card. It was really annoying, and here in a few minutes you're going to see that why it was annoying. So I'm going to fit that on. I'm going to cut it down so that it fits in the square. And then I'm going to take my 3M glue gun, or Scotch, I believe it's Scotch. And then what we're going to do is tape that acetate to the frame, and that's what makes the actual window to this shaker card. I'm going to fit the acetate onto the frame and make sure that it's down flat. And I'll hold it up here so that you could see it. Well, you hear my dogs running probably. And then I'm doing a little cleanup there. So then it's time to actually do the sentiment. And so what I'm doing is cutting a piece of paper 4 1/4 by 5 here. I'm going to use this to actually do some practice stamping for the sentiment for the inside. And I'm going to use it also as the base, I believe, for the card as well. There we go, yeah. And then you just hear Iselle barking. This is where I do my second mistake. I actually should have put the bottom of this piece of paper onto the card base before I put the window on. So what I actually have to do is take a pencil and mark all 4 corners to know where to tape this down to, or glue it down to the cardstock. You should do this before you put the acetate on the frame, but I, for some reason, didn't. So I'm going to line this up to the 4 marks that I just made. It takes me a few minutes to get it even though I marked it. You would think it would be easy, but it's not. I had to do some moving there. And then I'm just going to make sure it looks even. You can see a little bit of the white, but it's okay. And then we're going to press that down and make sure it's stuck to the paper. Pretty good. Now it's time to do the sentiment. And again, this is where another mistake I made. I'm going to take some 3M foam tape, and I'm actually going to double that up. And I'm going to cut a little sliver off the side of it, because this is what gives the height of the card, so the inside parts can move as the shaker card. I put this on all 4 sides. You just want to get it as close to the edge of the acetate as possible without going into the actual visual space of the card. And you'll want to save the little spots or the little pieces that you are cutting off, because you're going to use those in a few minutes on or when we add the fish to the card. So don't throw those away. And you want to make sure there's no gaps in any of the paper, so none of your sequins or glitter or whatever you decide to put into the card, they don't fall out of the card. And then I'm just going to fit that in there. And now it's time for the sentiment. The reason why this is hard is because the acetate is actually taller because of the 3M tape. So what I'm going to have to do is make sure that I'm pressing down extra hard on the Misty to make sure I get a good impression with the Versamark to put the powder on. So what I'm going to do is put a piece of white paper here that I cut out, and I'm going to stamp this to make sure that it's lined up. And I believe here that it wasn't lined up, so I decide to move it again to see if I can get it straighter. And yeah, so I take it off, I move it around a little bit, and then I'm going to restamp that to make sure that it's even, so that when it goes on the acetate, it'll look even. And I use the sentiments Peace and Harmony. So now I'm going to lay the acetate down. I'm going to use my powder tool to get all the static from the card off. And then in a few moments, you're going to see that it really didn't work out that well. So I actually had to remove a lot of the powder after pouring it on. There I go using the Versamark to do the stamping. I'm going to stamp it down, and then I'm just going to look to the side to see if I actually received a good impression, and I didn't, so I just made sure to press it down extra hard so that the sentiment actually showed up on the acetate. So then I'm just going to use some fine white embossing powder to do the embossing with. Another mistake here is that you should actually do this embossing, before you attach anything to it. Here, a lot of powder gets stuck to the acetate, so I have to take a brush and wipe a lot of that off. That took a lot of time, probably 15 minutes to try to get all that powder off so that it wouldn't show up when you use the heating tool to emboss this. Also, while embossing with this 3M foam tape on, it kind of warps the card actually. So that's why you want to do the embossing before you attach anything. So I'm going to clean up the embossing powder here. And then once I do that, I take the heat tool and I'm going to heat this up to melt the embossing powder. The thing about this is you want your embossing gun or your heat gun to actually be really hot prior to doing this, because you don't want to melt the acetate. It's heat resistant, but you could still melt it. And then I'm just getting it, I'm just making sure that everything looks okay before I start putting in the pieces of the shaker card. And then I'm just going to put it together really quick to see exactly how I really want it to be. These pieces are going to be loose on the inside, so I'm just messing around with it to make sure that everything's going to work inside. I use the powder tool on the inside of the tape so none of the pieces get stuck to the tape. And then I'm just going to add some sequins. I believe I use rose gold in this, maybe some silver sequins, and a few acrylic like raindrops. And I'll have links to everything that I use on this card in the description, in the YouTube description, so that you could go out and find what I used. Those are affiliate links, so if you use any of those links, there's no extra cost. You can use those links to shop, and I get a little kickback from it so that I can make future videos for you guys. So I'm placing all the pieces of the shaker card inside this, and now it's time to adhere the frame to the card. Sometimes this is really hard, and this is usually the hardest part for me. Is actually putting this down. And you'll see here in a second, I do a little freak out moment because it's not even, but I actually hadn't pressed it down, so I was still able to pick it up a little bit. So I get this, it's ready. I'm going to shake it here for you guys so you can see all the pieces shaking. I know it's a little fast, but you get the point. And now what I'm going to do is just attach the koi fish and those thin pieces I told you to save. This is what you're going to do to attach the fish. Now you don't have to do this part. You could actually just glued it down to the acetate, but I wanted to give it a little more dimension. So that's why I have added this to the fish. In retrospect, after looking at the card, I think I should have probably just glued the fish down without any tape. because the shaker card doesn't shake as much with the fish on it this way, and I believe it's just because of the weight of the tape on the card. Okay, so I just finished gluing this down onto Neenah cardstock 110 pound solar white paper, and I glued it down and it's done. I will shake it here a little bit for you so you can see all the nice pieces that are in the card. And I want to thank you guys for watching, and I really appreciate all the subscriptions that I've gotten so far. So please be sure to subscribe. Thank you and have a great day, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.